Welcome, Screen Junkies. I am so excited today because I'm sitting next to Haley Joel Osment. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have so much going on right now. We're going to get to it.
Sure.
As much as we can. Let's start with Silicon Valley. You have an arc coming up this season. I want to hear about your character, but I actually want to kick us off by looking at an image, and you just walk me through what's happening here.
Sure. I'm very limited in what I can say. That is, I think, was on my Instagram, but I pulled it from the trailer they released, so I know that the world is allowed to see that. But I am just a player in the Silicon Valley world, and I become very interested in Richard's technology, and we sort of have an arc together. But I'm standing up there, you can see, with Stephen Tobolowsky, who's fantastic. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, I don't know if it's my untrusting nature or what, but I immediately, even in just watching the trailer, was like, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. He's going after Richard in some way.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
But then you also sort of seem like an advocate, like a believer in him, right?
That's
yeah. I mean, a little bit.
He becomes interested in what Richard has made. Yeah. I can say what I say in the trailer, which is that you have the best technology I've ever seen.
Yeah,
so,
and I want it for myself. Yeah. How scary? That's VR. How scary do you find VR?
I guess not scary. I always think of like when it happens and the technology continues to improve and all that, but just I also remember like seeing those videos online. There's one of some guy at a mall doing a roller coaster and his friend like pushes him a little and he freaks out and like can't get his equilibrium and everything. Like I think it still has to overcome the fact that you're wearing this huge thing on your face all the time, you know, and the few times that I've worn it to play games and everything, like it's hard to do that for a long time. But now they have sort of things that can, I forget what this one was, but like it shoots it at your, it's not a display, it shoots the beams into your retinas directly, so it's projected inside your eyeball. So yeah, we'll see how comfortable everyone feels with that.
That sounds like a horrible, horrible nightmarescape. I don't like that at all. Yeah. Even worse than VR. VR, though, I actually think is interesting and more exciting. They have been using it in so many different ways. It was at Sundance, so independent films are using VR. I'm only asking, obviously, because I'm so curious about that picture. How much do they immerse you when you join a show like that? How much do they try and catch you up with the lingo and things like that?
That is an important part of the show. They have a terrific writing staff and then some advisors who make sure that we are saying everything correctly, which is important. And also just that when you're talking about anything technical on the show, you want to make sure that you understand it at least as much as you can, so you aren't just rattling it off stuff, but you know why something is important and what you're saying and everything. And yeah, just talk to there's some really interesting people. I mean, the actors obviously and the writers and everything, but also some of the advisors they have on set who have had interesting careers in Silicon Valley and things like that. And just, yeah.
Do you ever find yourself kind of picking up on the advisors' mannerisms and bringing that into do they have particular Silicon Valley-esque mannerisms?
No.
I don't know what I mean by that.
The sort of, the guys who I think get that position on the show, they were very relaxed guys and everything. Like the sort of characters that you see pop up on Silicon Valley that, you know, they're having some fun with or taking license with. I mean, I think they've said these in interviews where even if they're really harsh and they're making fun of them, like the guys just like being on television in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting hearing when, you know, they've encountered them in Silicon Valley when they had that initial screening the first season that Elon Musk went to and everything. It's just very interesting to see how those guys react to it. Yeah.
Elon Musk, but the weird thing about Elon Musk is that he's not as much of a character in terms of his mannerisms as he should be.
He wants to die on Mars. That's a pretty strong character.
But he says it in such a reasonable way. You know, he's not like, I want to die on Mars and I look crazy while I'm saying this. He looks so reasonable.
Expectation of it,
that you're like, sure. I remember seeing the, I'm going down a whole rabbit hole about Elon Musk, which I will now pull back from. But it was like Werner Herzog's documentary, and he's sitting there trying to convince Elon Musk that he should also go to Mars.
Werner wants to go too? I think he should.
And Elon's face is just like...
Our director on Oasis, actually, a space travel company, potential space travel company, wanted him to shoot a documentary that they'd be doing in the future going into space. And he was like, I don't think so. The first couple rockets usually blow up. So like maybe down the line.
Maybe
but
down the line.
Not the first rocket that goes up into space. Yeah.
I
would rather Elon build the Hyperloop, though.
Yeah.
LA to New York. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we should have that. Or New York to...
Well, here's a question for you, actually. This is a serious, because I would rather he spend his time here instead of trying to colonize Mars, which, as we've mentioned, you have 2 sci-fi series coming up. One of them is about colonizing another planet, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, though, dangerously sci-fi has given people like Elon Musk and then the rest of the society just this subconscious idea that, oh, eventually we're going to colonize other planets. Let's make hay with this one.
It's
like
it's a very, very interesting decision that you have to make. And I think it's possible to do both. Like, I do think we should go eventually to other planets just as a safeguard against going extinct.
Sure. But we shouldn't have to safeguard ourselves against going extinct.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you should also be at least putting some, I mean, companies like that have so much power with the government, so much money, to put a little of that into not necessarily like the high-end stuff, but just like making our basic services work. That would be kind of, and we're at a point right now where there is a retreat on the governmental level from those sort of services and like having, you know, the government work and things. It's like maybe we could at least have it be functional, you know, and not have highways and bridges collapsing and stuff like that. Like, I would like those basic services to work.
Yeah, let's pave the roads, Elon.
Water, you know, I mean, the LA River just dumps all of this into the ocean. We don't have any collection technology or limited technology for when we have those rainstorms. It's like those basic, you know, not very sexy technological things, but very important things.
I like that this interview has turned into a message for Elon. Elon, we know that you're listening, and we would like you to
New York to LA in 20 minutes. That's all we're saying. Yeah.
Occam's razor, Elon. Let's keep it simple. Let's get the streets paved and get clean water.
Exactly.
And we'll worry about Mars.
Yeah.
He's like, screw you, I'm going to Mars.
Well, you bring up an interesting division between Silicon Valley and Oasis, because Oasis is like the dark future, where it's dirty and the technology can get us to another planet, but there's a sense of desperation and, you know, global decline and everything. And with Silicon Valley, it's a lot of people on that show who are talking about making the world a better place.
Yeah.
And I think in that New York Times interview about Mike Judge that came out last week, is like his basic thing that he wanted to explore on the show is, will the hippie Steve Jobs culture prevail in Silicon Valley, or will the libertarian, you know, printing money, think of the younger generation prevail? And it's fascinating to think about.
Your character seems to ride those lines, like be right in the middle of those two things. Just literally judging on the picture, which is what I'm doing.
You have analyzed that very well.
I have a lot of thoughts about that one image. Do you have relationships with the other characters, or is it mostly just Richard?
We all get to know each other. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. It's a nice arc.
That's got to be a fun set.
I love all those guys. So kind and welcoming. You know, to come into it. It's fun to be on a show like that where they've had 4 successful seasons, and just there's a really good atmosphere on the set. And I enjoy all of their comedy outside of the show.
Are you a sci-fi fan?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. What do you think of The Last Jedi?
I'm excited. Yeah, it still feels a long way away. So when you look at a trailer like that, you're like, oh, 2 minutes, like I'm going to get all this information. You're like, no, it's you're still going to walk in December not knowing a whole lot, but I'm looking forward to it.
Are you the type that will theorize on these things? Like, are you like, I know who Ray's parents are? Or
maybe the experience of watching Game of Thrones has pushed me a little bit more into that. Like, typically I'm not a big speculator. I'm not trying to read too far between the lines, because whether you're reading a book or seeing a TV show or going into a film, I like being surprised. But with Game of Thrones, with all the theories that popped up with that, and I watched the show first and then kind of got interested in reading the books, and like that has sort of pushed my fandom in that direction. Yeah.
So are you caught up with the books?
Yeah, I'm caught up.
Have you read the chapters that he's released?
I have, yeah.
This is awesome.
Wins a Winner, I think, would be pretty cool, yeah.
What's your number one? Now we're going to go down to Game of Thrones. We have to talk about your shows, but I want to hear your number one favorite Game of Thrones theory.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was cool that everybody figured out the stuff about Jon a long time ago.
Yeah.
And my experience with the whole series was in 2013 when the Red Wedding happened.
Mm-hmm.
I had no knowledge of the books or the show or anything. I saw they had all those reaction videos online. It was you made this big impact on the internet. And I was like, well, it's the summertime. I'll be mad if I come around to watching the show and it's spoiled for me before I watch it. So like I'm just gonna like truck through 3 seasons and get there. And I was able to get at least the first 3 seasons without having anything spoiled for me.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
you
nice.
must have stayed entirely away from the internet.
Although, as you know, I'm not as good an analyst as you, because I had forgotten that Sean Bean mysteriously disappears from all of the advertisements and posters and everything around season 2.
Oh yeah,
that was a genuine surprise for me.
They pay us to do that kind of high thinking sleuthing. They're like, he seems to not be there anymore. Yeah. I had read the book though, the first book, so I knew that was good. Which is like, in retrospect, I think it's probably fun to watch the show.
Right. Yeah. Well, and for me, like even doing it backwards is that I respect so much how they're able to take all that material and to, you know, be pretty successful in cutting out things where you just have to, the way that they, you know, to shoot something with all those characters and everything. But then to go to the books and go, wow, the world is so gigantic and so mysterious in the books. Like a perfect example for me is when Daenerys is in the House of the Undying. Like that's great in the show. That's maybe my favorite chapter in the books because so much is happening that it would be impossible to do it that way on the show. There's all kinds of foreshadowing in there. I think there's a couple of images that, you know, obviously have come to pass already, but there might be more that we haven't seen yet. But yeah, it's cool to do both in tandem.
Do you have one theory of how it's going to end?
No, not really. Like I've entertained some options. I think a really cold-blooded way they could do it is that like the winter wins. Like that would be kind of great. But I'm most curious to see how Daenerys and Jon will interact, whether they'll team up or whether that you know, they're going to be at cross purposes in the coming season. Yeah.
Well, he likes to expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
And we can't expect a happy ending, that's for sure, which means we'll probably get one.
Yeah.
Is how I'm taking. They'll get married and it'll be like,
he could marry his aunt. Like that
easily.
Would be in keeping with the world of the show. It would be very unsettling, I think, for fans that have followed it, but it would be totally within the
I don't know if anything can unsettle us anymore.
Yeah.
I think that people are planning for them to team up, so probably they won't.
Yeah.
And definitely everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was a moment, I hadn't gotten that far in the books yet, but when Tyrion and Jorah are captured by pirates and they're just going to kill him. And I was like, I got really scared because I was like, they would just kill him in this random way. Like, that's totally in keeping with the show.
But Griff, and then he just never showed up.
Yeah.
He just never showed up. Wow. Nerd Talk is our new podcast that we're starting up immediately. Let's talk about your shows, Future Man. So these are two very different series because one's a comedy, one's much darker.
Yeah.
Oasis is an Amazon pilot that you can go and vote on right now, and then that's how Amazon will choose to move forward with their series. And it's doing very well already.
We're so happy with the numbers. Yeah, people have really been enjoying it. And yeah, you don't need a Prime membership to see it. You can watch it just off the Amazon website. So.
And you are a former pot grower.
That's right,
in this series. Yeah. What kind of research did you do for that?
Oh, you know, a lot of
well, you were working with Seth Rogen.
But it was fun because my character's not in the book that it's based on. So that before we started shooting, they were like, you know, you can think about where your character came from. You can think about what his past has been like and everything. And yes, you know, had a big pot farm in Arizona and got busted for it, but they ended up valuing his skills in conserving water, which is, as we were talking about earlier, very important in the future. And they decide, instead of sending him to prison, they're going to send him to Oasis. So,
and this is this colony to help save the earth. And how do you did they talk to you much about the Bible? Did they just sort of leave it at the pilot and you don't want to think any further ahead? I'm
sure that Richard did a lot of research. He's a terrific actor and was, you know, so dedicated and so focused the whole time we were shooting. Because the story is you know, he's the lead and it's about Peter's journey. And the book that it's based on is less, I mean, just by necessity of the form, like our show, we have to come up with a little bit more suspense and plot and everything. But the book is more of a theological meditation on the implications of this colony and everything. So I'm excited to see where we'll go with it because they were very straightforward with religion being a big part of it and Peter's character being a very important part of who he is. Yeah.
So when you say, in terms of like, what would God mean if then we are on a different planet because we've only really had an image or a perception of it that's very earth driven?
Without giving too much away, it's in the book, but if you were taking this to another planet or you know, somebody who had no frame of reference for the Bible and what it's based on, how could there be a potential successful communication between two different cultures, and how could there be a tragic misunderstanding of between two different cultures? So I think the book is talking a little bit about, you know, when this has happened in the past, when you had, you know, clashes of cultures, you had, you know, European colonialism in the Americas and everything. I think that's sort of all underlying the story.
So Future Man, on the other hand, is a comedy series.
Yeah.
It's brought to us by, speaking of pot, now I know where you learned all about your character for Oasis because you were working with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg and Josh Hutcherson, which I need to understand. This combination fascinates me because, of course, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg worked together since they were embryos practically, and they do everything together. They're partners. But then you bring Josh Hutcherson into the mix, and how does it change that dynamic creatively?
Well, they're all fantastic, and I think, I don't know if they'd worked together beforehand, but I know they just did a movie I'm looking forward to very much, the Disaster Artist. Josh is in that, and I think that's where they got to know each other really well. I guess, well, the pilot for this hasn't come out yet, and this has sort of a convoluted plot line too, but basically Josh and I knew each other growing up in the series, and I was a terrible bully to him, and when we grow up, he becomes a janitor, and I become a medical researcher with a sadistic side, and sort of continue to bully him and everything, and then some strange stuff happens.
But you're a gamer in the series too.
No, Josh
is the gamer in the series.
That's his one thing at night that he excels at, is that he's a master online gamer, and that's the one world that he, you know, is not a loser as he is in real life.
Oh, that's so sad. I love it. But he also travels through time. I'm now guessing through. I'm going to pitch it. Okay. There is an accident in your lab. Do you have a lab?
I do have a lab, but there's no accident.
Come on. Okay. The game opens a portal to time travel in which he goes back in time, and one of the things that he tries to do is stop your bullying to change the trajectory of both of your futures, all of Back to the Future.
Possibly.
Are you Biff?
Possibly. Biff is an interesting thing to think about. The video game is his window into this sort of sci-fi world and everything, and he, you know, strange things start to happen that change the, you know, the timeline of the world, and he has to save humanity. Yeah.
This is always the big sci-fi question. Would you go back in time and change any event?
With that, I think that if that were possible theoretically, you could never get back to where you started, probably. Like, if there is some way to bend time or something, you'd be sent onto some other track, or you could go one direction but not return. So I don't think I would. I think that whole butterfly effect thing of that, like, whatever, you know, you move a cup and it changes the course of history, I do think that would hold true. But yeah, it's interesting, like with space travel and with time travel, it's like, would you risk not being able to return to your previous life to be maybe the first person to go and do something crazy like this?
I don't even think it's that. It's like, what disaster could you cause, right?
Well, yeah, in trying to prevent a disaster, if you went and tried to stop Hitler or something, like, what would the consequences be? What would you throw out of balance? Like, it's a very complicated thing.
Yeah, there's a Doctor Who episode all about it that we can learn.
Now, that's a show I need to start watching. I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, and there's an episode called Let's Kill Hitler. And it's great. But yeah, it is one of those things that you have to think in these shows, and I wonder if they'll deal with it here. You have to have a certain amount of megalomania to be the person to be like, I'll travel through time, or I'll go this far into space, right?
Right.
They never do. It's always like, no, I'm Marty. I'm
What's
so
going
likable.
on with Bran when he's talking to Hodor? You know, that was pretty crazy.
You know that there's this whole theory about Bran that the Mad King was hearing Bran say, burn them all, but he's talking about the dragons burning the Ice Walkers, and the Mad King king is just hearing burn them all, burn them all.
That could be cool. That he had the seed of that idea from the first book, because Hodor's in the first book, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's the stuff that's even more than who is Jon Snow's, mother, everything.
Yeah.
That other stuff that is, you're not even like, oh, something's going to come out of that. It just is completely unexpected. It's so exciting.
Yeah. But there is an entire theory that Bran is the impetus, the cause, the inciting incident for everything. But by traveling through time, it's very dangerous.
It is. Yeah. You can put your fingerprints on things that have already happened.
Yeah. Who wants that kind of responsibility?
I don't.
When I was waiting tables, people would ask me for a recommendation, and I tell them I can't be responsible for your life choices. No joke, because I'm like, I can't.
That's true.
So you, when we first met you at the beginning of your career, it was obviously a lot of dramatic roles, but you moved more into comedy. Is that something that was conscious, or is that sort of just the way things evolved? I
love doing comedy, but I think it's mostly just been because it's a great time for comedy right now. I mean, all of these series now with streaming, and I'm on a show on Hulu and Amazon, and I did another Amazon show, Alpha House, and one of my favorites.
That was so fun.
Yeah, that was a terrific cast, really good project. I wish that we could have done a season now, considering all the things that have happened in the political world. But and then with the Spoils of Babylon, that was on IFC, and then when it went to Netflix, it found this whole giant new audience and everything. Just really unique stuff that can have its own life on these services, because you just have more options now. So I like that.
It's one of the biggest ways. You think about voting on a pilot, right? Like, the industry has changed so much, and you've grown up in it. What have been some of the biggest changes that you've noticed?
Well, one of them is happening right now, is that when we were promoting films in the late 90s, it would be a junket at a hotel for 3 days, and you do 200 interviews, and all of them would be 3 minutes and very short. And now with podcasts and YouTube and everything, like, there is more of a fan culture that wants longer form stuff, the opportunity to get into more depth with these things, which I enjoy a lot more than, 3 quick questions about, a film that you're doing that's for a television spot. Like, this is a lot more of a rewarding way to promote things. And, doing all of this, like, it does help you sort of think about the show that you're making, even more, because you're spending the off season between seasons, having these sorts of conversations.
Have you taken any? That's interesting. There is a junket happening right now that I sent someone to, because they are really hard for both parties. They suck in a way. It's like your cattle shoved into this room for 4 minutes.
Well, those guys on the Marvel shows and everything, they also do them in every country around the world.
It's exhausting.
It's just months of it. Yeah, it's a grind. Yeah.
Has anyone given you a really good idea for a character in an interview? I mean, I feel like I've given you.
If you've got an idea, I'm open to listening. No, I can't say that I've ever come up with a character idea through an interview, but there has been insight into certain things, and especially with films that like AI and The Sixth Sense, there have been some, like last year was the 15th anniversary for AI, so I was doing some retrospective interviews from that, and going and thinking about it now, after all this time, like, you do sort of have new insight into it, that you couldn't have had 15 years ago.
Well, you were also a little kid.
Sure.
To be fair, it's a little you. Can you name how many Oscar-winning actors or directors that you've worked with? Can you name in 30 seconds?
Oh, gosh. Well, I worked with Steven, and I worked with Knight. I worked with Michael Caine and Robert Duvall, Kevin Spacey, Helen Hunt.
Those were the ones that we had,
Jude
too.
Law. Yeah. And that year was crazy because it was right before we started shooting AI, and I had met with Steven, and we were starting to rehearse that movie, and that was the year that the Oscars happened for me. And he said, pay attention to the point in the Oscar broadcast where all the actors and everybody is running around trying to meet their favorite actors and directors, because that's, I think, the coolest part of the ceremony. And it was true. And the first person that came up to me was Jude Law, and at the time we had not met, but we were both in the process of doing getting going on AI, and he came over and he's like, "I really play robots in this movie." It's like, yeah, so cool little moments like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice that anyone gave you that has really actually stayed with you?
Oh yeah, tons of it. And I think that I was very lucky in a lot of ways, but in terms of what has set me up to hopefully work a long time in this business and not just getting jobs, but to have the right mindset about it. Number one was parents who were like, you can quit at any time. Like, it's not about the fame stuff and everything. Like, I always enjoyed doing it, but it's like, if you don't want to do this, you know, stop. And working with directors and fellow actors that, there are good performances from kids in films, I think, where, you are trying to get something out of a kid, or like, oh, your dog died or something, and like that. But Steven and Knight and all these directors were really great at trying to explain things to me as they would any other actor on the project. And that makes it stand out in my memory more. Like, I remember those experiences so well because they treated me with that kindness and respect. And that also put the bug in me to want to do it forever, because you see somebody direct a movie like that and you're like, this is where I want to be.
Sort of a horror show to think about, somebody saying to a little kid, your parents are dead, feel things.
I think that's happened once or twice on some other films, probably.
Yeah, but not to you. I mean, like, to me, no. So they didn't lock you in a closet and go, that's what fear feels like.
No, that would be great.
So bring it onto the set.
That's true.
Here's a little bit of a spoiler question. Did you see Split?
No, I need to see that. I'm behind. I'm behind with movies.
Good.
I heard. Yeah, it sounded amazing.
And there's a thing that I wanted to ask you about it, but I don't want to spoil it for you. Have you heard the big spoiler?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's good. How do you keep yourself immune?
I should watch this
things?
Tonight. Yeah.
You have to. Let's imagine a world in which we had a M. Night Shyamalan expanded universe. Yeah. Would you ever? I was actually thinking, I'm not so into the returning, and I don't know how you feel about that. But Cole, as an adult, I think it'd be pretty cool to see, like, in a series.
I can't remember who brought it up at the time. I know it wasn't Knight, but there was talk, like, after, you know, it was in theaters, like Sixth Sense 2, and I remember Knight being like, no, we're not doing that. Like,
no, you never would want to return
and
to
I don't
it?
think I would have at the time, or not because I wouldn't want to do it, but just because, you know, he wrote this perfect script and everything went so well on it. It's like, you don't want to step on that, I think, with future installments. But, you know, it is a very interesting character, the concept of it. I mean, one of the things, you know, my dad said to me after I read the script, he's like, the script is not so much about the fear of death, but it's the fear of not being able to communicate with other people. And so my relationship to that movie was always from that perspective. And as an audience member and as someone participating in it, it's like, oh, that's what I think kind of gave it a strong connection for people, is that there's the supernatural elements to it, but everybody can identify with being afraid that you're not communicating with the people that you love.
I don't know, the creepy girl under the bed also.
Misha Barton?
Very scary. We hadn't seen the OC yet. We didn't know how charming she was to become.
I know.
I think that's interesting, because the whole thing is about your ability to over communicate in a way.
That's the only way he learns how to survive, is he understands that his purpose, if you can call it that, is to allow people to have that communication
and have that connection. Yeah. A lot for a little kid. I gotta say, it is, and I know you've probably been told this a million times, you see young people working, and I always worry about them. Yeah. I really do. I mean, it's scary to me, I think, this industry, and you really have come out of it unscathed, seemingly. And you just attribute that all mostly to your parents?
That's the number one important thing, that, you know, because when I started doing this, and a question you get in interviews a lot was like, what about, you know, so-and-so who had a bad experience or did this bad thing and everything. And it's rarely the kid's fault, you know. It's you got to have parents looking out for you. And I had virtually zero contact with the Hollywood part of Hollywood, you know, post-college, maybe. I probably still don't have any contact with that. It was just, you know, working on the set, and I would go to school. I went to regular school all the way through to college, you know, and that's my parents making sure that, you know, you have friends outside of the industry. You're spending your time on wholesome activities. Although the sets I was on were pretty wholesome, I would say.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And do you still find that balance now? You sort of disconnect and don't live in the heart of it all?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll work on a project of any type. And, now I'm old enough to where it's, I definitely don't go to a lot of events and parties and guest list stuff and everything. But
well, they're horrible.
Yeah, it's like
events are horrible.
Yeah, this is like when you spend your job doing it, like you want to relax with things that are kind of away from it. So
they're so high strung, right? Like no one's having fun there.
Yeah, but it's nice because especially in college, like I met a bunch of people who. It's funny, a lot of them actually came out of theater and are now working over here, which is really neat. But a lot of friends that I didn't meet like on the set or anything when I was younger, just people who come from a lot of different walks of life, which I feel grateful for.
So we can look for you in the Hulu show.
Yes.
Future Man is coming out in the spring. Do we have the release date?
Not yet. I think it'll be this year. It might even be this summer.
Okay.
But we are almost done shooting season 1, so it'll come out pretty soon.
And we will see Amazon. You have to go there. You have to vote for Oasis, although, again, doing very well. April 23rd. Is
Silicon
the
Valley.
Silicon Valley
That's
premiere.
right.
Lots of it. What else do we plug for you?
Oasis, you can see on Amazon. I have a film called Holding Patterns that's going to be at the Newport Film Festival this weekend with Freddie Highmore, who's also wonderful.
I love him.
He's terrific. Yeah, he's been directing some Bates Motel too, which I think is great.
He?
So, yeah, he's a very smart guy.
Do you know he speaks like 5 languages?
I didn't know that.
It's nuts.
No.
And I got a whole story, but he's amazing. Do you want to direct? Do you want to get behind the camera?
I would love to. Yeah. In college, the part of NYU I went to, the experimental theater wing, a lot of it was self-scripting and generating your own work and everything. And so even since I was there, I've had some ideas that I'd want to eventually or soon see become reality. But I can't complain for the reason that I haven't, which has just been I've been busy with this stuff. So
you've been busy working.
I'm pretty happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we plug our upcoming Game of Thrones podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully George season 7 part 2. 2 people I think would look pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, we have a message for Elon. We have a message for George. Although George, the message is just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I want to go to his cinema in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I've been planning this Southwestern road trip for a long time because there's a couple things that I'd like to see on that trail. And I was like, I would go to Santa Fe just to go catch his movie theater. I think that's the coolest thing to do.
I think so too.
Yeah,
also, he's probably there.
Yeah, if you wanted to catch sight of George, he probably is there. But yeah, they always have cool movies running there. So
yeah, bend his ear a little bit, catch a good movie. I wonder, and it would be very revealing to see what he's playing there.
Yeah, their schedule is excellent. A mixture of really good. They were playing that German movie that I also need to see. It's like the 3-hour Joni Erdmann. Yeah, I'm saying it wrong.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
yes,
that's what they're playing like this month right now, and then they're doing some revivals and stuff like that. But it's a cool schedule.
Well, if you're not, you should take an afternoon trip. There's a great little theater down the street, right on Wilshire, that's always playing things. Like one night it was playing All About Eve and the Lure, which is the Polish mermaid musical. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Yes.
Is that the one that says fine arts on it? Because I make myself see it say fire ants because it's in a cursive. That's my relationship to it.
It's a better name for it. The Fire Ants Theater.
Yes, it catches your eye. Yeah.
We will wake you up with our art. I don't know what that meant. Thank you so much for being here. You have any final Game of Thrones thoughts? That's the important thing, I think.
I'm just I'm scared because if we do go back to Cape Town. In July, which is if we get picked up, it'll be sometime around there. That's right when the season's coming out. So I'm like, I gotta figure out. I don't know if the license for HBO Go will work. So I need to figure out a way to watch it.
I think because they were the #1 most illegally downloaded show, I think HBO actually worked it out to be day and date.
Oh.
I think I could be lying to us, but I think because most shows of like BBC Doctor Who has worked that out.
My Netflix was very different in South Africa.
Yeah, I don't know.
It didn't really work.
It didn't work at all.
Yeah. Well, luckily, the one thing that would have killed me was when the Dodgers in the playoffs, and luckily MLB had worked out something, and the NFL had worked out something. But all the sports channels in my hotel were sailing, cricket, more sailing, soccer, rugby, Aussie rules, like all the sports from the region, but baseball I had to find myself.
Well, hopefully the HBO Go will be working. I think that they have worked it out. Otherwise, you're just going to have to.
Because Twitter's going to spoil it for me. I'm just going to have to log off on Twitter all summer until I get back.
You can mute the hashtag. So if there's a hashtag Game of Thrones, you can mute the hashtag.
I can't believe I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, Twitter things that I've learned.
That's good.
I've learned to protect, but you've seemed to be able to protect yourself very much from the Game of Thrones spoilers. April 23rd for Silicon Valley. Go to Amazon. Go to Hulu, watch all of the things. Do you like them to follow you on the social media?
Absolutely, yeah. At Haley Joel Osment. That's a new thing for me. I just joined like a year and a half ago, so I'm having fun with that. I have a feeling that Silicon Valley will bring up some interesting stuff
I'm
on
sure
there.
It will.
So yeah, I'll be there, and yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, don't tweet about Game of Thrones. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.